I bought this gun about almost 10 years ago. I got it used from Gander Mountain when they used to be up in Middletown, New York. And I only paid a few $100 for it. And I've told this story a number of times. When I got the gun, it did not have a forearm. I opened the box. It was a plain box. There was just the shotgun in the box. It was an over and under. There was no forearm assembly to it. And there was no way to actually fire the gun because the gun will not cock the hammers without that forearm assembly. It's part of the mechanism. So I contacted Stoeger. I looked online. The guys from Gander Mountain gave me the website to go on to, and they were very helpful. Stoeger took my address, and they actually shipped me a forearm assembly with all of the mechanism, with the locking mechanism and everything already built, already all together. And the only thing I ended up having to do, it was bare wood. I ended up refinishing it, which just basically involved just sanding it down and putting a nice stain on it. I stained the stock to match. So I did that. So added a couple of things to it, and I have a very nice shooting over and under shotgun. So not too long after I bought it, I started having this issue. For a long time, I have had a problem with this gun where every time that you fire, you pull the trigger once, bottom barrel fires. You pull the trigger again, top barrel fires. If I break the unit open, I extract the 2 spent cartridges, put 2 new cartridges in, reset the gun. If I go to pull the trigger again for another round, sometimes it fires, sometimes it doesn't. Now on the flip side of that, if I cycle the safety after every time that I cock that gun, if I break it open, when you break open an over and under shotgun, it cocks the 2 hammers. When I cycle the safety on, then safety back off again, the gun fires flawlessly. And I disassembled it a while ago, and I tracked it down to an issue that I'm having with these 2 Sears. This is a very simple safety assembly. You push the safety forward, and that disengages the safety. So when these Sears cock back, they both cock back onto the safety. The safety now links that sear to the trigger. Okay, first time you pull the trigger, boom. But the second time you pull the trigger, this second sear, okay, the sear for the top barrel, is not, it happened just now. It's not in contact with the trigger mechanism. Once I get it down to the action block, barrel, forearm assembly, stock assembly, off the gun. I drive out, of course I have to remove, before I drive anything out, I have to remove the 2 hammer springs, okay? They're under a little bit of tension, and they pop right out. Then I have to put it on a piece of wood and drive out the hammer pin that removes the 2 hammers and the firing pin plungers. And that's all of this nonsense that I have over here. So that will strip this down to this point. Now I have to take the pin out that holds the 2 Sears in place. I'm going to remove these 2 Sears. I have to make sure I remove it from the correct side because these pins go in a certain way, and you have to make damn sure that you're driving them out in the correct way. If you don't drive these pins out correctly, you can destroy the action. There we go. You could actually destroy the action where the pin will not go back in. And then you have to start all over with a new action block, and that's not good because these action blocks, if you can get them, you might as well just buy a new shotgun. Okay, so now the sears are out, the hammers are out. Next step is to remove this lever lock mechanism that's inside. Now what this does in an over and under, this connects through this little cotter pin to your locking lever. Okay, and your locking lever is what actually locks your shotgun closed. Okay, you see when I popped that, these two pins popped out? These two pins fit into two dimples that are on the barrel. And that's how, if you watch, they'll retract. And it locks right up. Okay, so I have to get this cotter pin out. And that's going to take a minute. So let's get that cotter pin out. Of course, that's going to have to be replaced. All right, and now we'll reset our mechanism, and the top, this should lift out. Okay, so this is under a lot of spring tension. That's why it won't just lift out. So let me see if I can compress the return spring that's inside there. And that should help me to wiggle this lever. There it goes. Out. Okay. And that was the locking pin. Okay, there's your top lever lock. Here is your spring, and well, let's get the locking mechanism out first. There's your locking mechanism. Here's your lever tension spring and plunger. Which fits in there. There we go. Spring and plunger. And there is the... It actually looks like I launched the spring for the lever lock pin, because I actually... And it's okay, because I have a new one. I planned on replacing that little plunger that's right up in here. That plunger is what resets your locking assembly. So I knew this was worn out, so I had planned on replacing it anyway. And so I'm not worried about the fact that I just launched the spring across the room somewhere. I'll find it eventually, or maybe I won't find it eventually. Okay? So that's out. The last thing that's got to come out are my firing pins, because I've got new firing pins for this also. And the firing pins, very simply, just lift out with the springs attached to them. And other than the cocking rod assemblies, okay, which I am not replacing, but now that I see that they can come out pretty cleanly, you know what? I might as well take them out and inspect them, make sure that they're moving freely, which they seem to be already. I'm not worried. I never had a problem cocking it. So, that is a semi-complete breakdown of most of your Stoeger over and under shotgun actions. Most of them, I say most of them, are the same. Some of the newer ones, this is a mechanical. Some of the newer ones have inertia style triggers, and that's a completely different animal. I don't own one of those guns, and I'm not going to go into that. But I am very happy in the fact that I can see quite a few parts that are worn that I'm going to be getting into. Now, these sears themselves aren't worn. However, the springs are. Look at that crazy spring. Come on, give me some focus on some of my smaller stuff, huh? Can you see that crazy looking spring? All right, that spring is no good. That spring is definitely no good. And I can tell from there's a scratching pattern. I don't know if you can tell, maybe if I can get the light to look correctly, but there's a wear mark right here on this sear. And it looks like that sear was hanging up, possibly on the other one. So that's something I'm going to have to look into. And while I'm at it, I am also going to be doing a trigger smoothing job. So basically all that's involved in a trigger smoothing job on a shotgun, because this is not a rifle, so we're not going to be doing a trigger job. This is a shotgun, not a rifle. So the trigger on this gun is anywhere from 6 to 7.5 pounds, according to my gauge. And it changes every time I shoot it. So the problem is most likely just friction on the inside parts. I'm going to take this apart. This is the actual trigger plunger, I guess you'd call it. I'm going to take some 1000 grit to that. Just make sure that there's no burrs or anything on that. And I'm going to do the same thing to the edges of the two sears. When I put the new ones in, I'm not going to reuse those old ones. And that should solve... And that should solve all of my problems with this gun. So let me get to work with some sandpaper. All right, so the first step in smoothing out the trigger on this shotgun is you can see from the light that this is actually got a lot of marks along the top here and the side. This is the trigger disconnector, okay, and this is part of my problem with the Sears. So I'm going to get some sandpaper, and without changing the angles, you see how that's shaped? Try to get you something behind it so you can see exactly. See how that's shaped a certain way? Okay, what I'm doing is I'm going to be polishing these parts down, but not changing the dimensions or angles. If I start changing dimensions and angles, I actually can change the way this gun operates, almost to the point of if I do something wrong, I could actually ruin the way this gun operates. I could cause it to fire immediately upon closing the action. I can cause it to not fire at all. So I'll get some sandpaper and we'll start smoothing that up. So I'll start off, I have 3 different grades of sandpaper that I use when I'm polishing parts. I've got 220, I've got 1000, and 2000. So 220 will actually start getting rid of any of the real big bumpy parts that are on this. So I'll start off, I'll find myself a nice even flat surface, and I'll just start rubbing that around. And it doesn't take much with the 220. There's a lot of material coming off it already. And as you can see from the light, I've already taken almost all of the bluing, or whatever kind of coating that's on this, off. And I'm already being able to see there's a lot of low spots in the face of this. So let's get this taken down. Wipe some of the gunk off, and you can see just from there, if you look, I can't believe it can't get a lot of focusing on it. If you look right there, you can see that I've got a whole bunch of gouges actually in the metal, and I can take that out with the sandpaper. And let's see if you can get this. Something else I noticed. Right along here, this side, there's a dimple. It's actually a dimple in the metal. So I don't know if that's a casting mark. I don't know if that happened when the piece was actually made. But let me get some work done on this, and I'm going to work on the top a little bit. And those are the only 2 surfaces on this piece that I'm going to have to smooth out. All right, so I've got most of the damage polished out of the disconnector, and without changing the angle of the two faces. Okay? Brought a couple of things to my attention. Number one, and this is a casting issue. This is why shotguns have to be fitted. That you can't just buy parts for a shotgun and then expect them to fit every other shotgun, especially these over and unders. This is cast crooked, and I don't know if you can see it, but I'm holding the, if you sight on this vertical piece, you can see this section here is actually, maybe if I can get it to focus, this section here is actually twisted slightly off kilter, and that gives the appearance that the top is also twisted. It's not level, but it actually is. I actually had a straight edge here a minute ago, and I put it on here, so the top is actually even. It's this piece that's twisted. So, and it's not like it was twisted to the point where it's not working correctly. It's just that's the way it was cast. And this is a cast piece. This is not hardened steel, which is why we can polish it so easily. So let me continue on. I got a piece of 1000 grit sandpaper here, and let me continue to polish this till we get a nice mirror finish, and then we can move on to something else. We've got pretty much the top lever together with the new parts. All new springs. We've got that lever lock assembly, and I'm going to show you the inside. Okay, so that is all together. Now, remember that spring when I took that lever out? I said it disappeared across the room. Didn't disappear across the room. So there was an issue that I had with the orientation of the spring and the plunger. Now, if you look at the diagram, and these diagrams are pretty good. Excuse my... Anyway, it shows a plunger, then it shows what looks like another plunger, then it shows the spring. Well, I had these two part numbers reversed, and when I had laid them out on the table, it looked like it was a spring plunger. It looked like it was a plunger, a spring, and then a plunger. Not two plungers up against each other. But that's the way it goes. The spring and the small plunger actually go inside the lever, while the large plunger is this piece that you see right here. And why am I kicking... All right, both my firing pins fell out, but that's okay. I don't have anything to hold them in just yet. Okay, so anyway, back to this. So that's what that looks like, okay? Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is because there ain't a lot of YouTube videos on people who want to take apart the actions on these over and unders in any type of detail. And I really wish I could do a nice rebuild video on this, but I've been working between polishing that. You can almost see it. You can almost see the mirror finish I got on the safety. Okay, that safety trigger disconnect there. Okay, so that's all polished and that's been reinstalled. Okay, there's only one pin on the bottom that holds it in. I didn't think that would be too interesting. But this top lever, I could never figure out how it comes apart. And once I started taking it apart, it was kind of a no-brainer. So we had that big spring and plunger that goes in. Then we have this assembly goes across the top, that your two pins that lock your barrel, they get cotter pinned to this lever, and then this pin, top pin, gets put in, and then you have a spring and a pin that gets put in here that you have to manipulate with a large punch and wiggle this down in slowly. Really wiggle it until it just catches. Then you're able to depress the other plunger. It pops down into place. It works the way it should. And now you can replace that cotter pin, which ties that whole assembly together. Okay? And now we're going to reinstall the sears. Actually, we're going to reinstall the hammers and the firing pin levers. We'll get that in there first because I have to put them in before the sears go in. And then I'll worry about polishing those sears up. Okay, so we've got the hammers in. And we've got the brand new firing pins. You can see that. Okay, so we've got the firing pins in place. These firing pins, these new firing pins, have a real wide, flat contact area on them. Let me see if I get the spring. There we go. All right, this is the old one. Now you see the old one has got almost like a dome to it. The new ones don't have that dome. So what it was doing was it was just catching the hammer right on the tip of that old one. Now this in and of itself wasn't part of the problems that I was having with the gun, but it just shows that there is a lot of wear on these firing pins. And these, they're not the hammers. The hammers weren't worn. It was the firing pin levers. That's what these secondary units are called. And I've got the new ones installed. And these are the hammers, and you can see they're nice and free. Everything inside is moving nice and free. And as I showed you before, the firing pins do come out very easily with a lot less force than needed than the old ones were. So that's definitely a good thing. So now what we're doing is these are the sears. So I had a problem. I can't use the new sears because the new sears, according to the diagram, are both the same size. Well, the original sears are two different sizes because if you had both the same size, they would both contact the trigger disconnector at the same time, which means that every time you pull the trigger, it would fire off both barrels. We don't want that. So we want bottom barrel first, top barrel second. So the two sears are two different sizes. So I'm going to have to return those and see. I'm going to check the website first. It's very possible that I made a mistake in the part numbers on the drawings, and I just ordered two of the same sear. It's the same size as the smaller of the two sears, but they're both the same as the smaller of the two. I don't have the larger one. So, like I said, I'm going to go with the old sears, and I hit him with a piece of 2,000 grit. What am I got on here? I just had 2,000 grit sitting on the table. And sure enough, I don't know if I could see, you can see that, but where the numbers are stamped, where the original numbers are stamped in that steel plate, that's where it was hanging up from. That's part of my issue. So this is all burred up. So I'm going to have to take this down. I'm going to switch it back over to 1,000 grit. And I'm going to take this back down and smooth these two out on either end. And then we'll reinstall them with the new pin and the new springs. The springs I can use. The springs are new springs. So let's get that done and installed, and let's get going here. Doesn't take much, and I could already feel with my finger the burrs are almost gone. This one I haven't touched yet, and I could actually feel the numbers, and I could feel the roughness on the edge of that. So I'm going to smooth up the two sides of the sears and then install them together so they don't interfere with each other. Okay, so we finished putting the action together. We've got everything back together. You can see I did a little bit of polishing on the sears. I did a little bit of polishing on the safety disconnect bar. Okay, so I also did some testing on it too, so I already know this works, but let me show you exactly what's what. So we open up the action, and as we open the action, you hear it click and you watch the hammers get cocked back, and they actually get cocked back and they're in position. They're on both sides, they're good. We'll close the action and watch it spring shut, which is what it's supposed to do. Okay? And then, without cycling the safety on and off, the safety is off right now. Bottom barrel, top barrel. Do it one more time. This is usually where the problem was coming in, where now, for some reason, it wouldn't fire. It would just click. But we can see that this fixed our issue. And the safety also works the way it was designed. Safety is now on, and the trigger is disconnected from the two sears, even though the hammers are locked back. Okay, we could bang this around. Let me get my wood block. All right, nothing's going to set that off. And while we're sitting here doing all of this, I'll show you about the trigger pull. And let's see if we reduce the trigger pull at all. Let's turn the safety back off. And let's see if we reduce the trigger pull any. Last time, the first pull of the trigger was 6 pounds. The second pull of the trigger was 7.5 pounds. So let's see what we got. All right, first pull of the trigger is now 6 pounds. And second pull of the trigger is 6.5 pounds. So best 2 out of 3. First trigger pull at 6 pounds. Second trigger pull at 6.5 pounds. Wow. That is actually accurate, because the last time, sometimes it would be 6 pounds, sometimes it would be 6.5 pounds, sometimes it would be 6.25 pounds. And then the second trigger pull would be 7, and then 7.25, and then 7.5, and then 7. So now we actually got this. Pretty dialed in. 6 pounds. 6.5 pounds. 3 times. That's what I'm talking about. Alright, so let's get this all back together and just give her a quick oiling, and back into safe she goes. Another gun repaired. Oh.